Hello everyone, how's it going? It is Theonor as always, and this time I'm bringing you my opinionated look at World of Warcraft Traveler. Now usually when I do these sorts of videos I prefer to tackle freshly released books or pieces of lore, but in this case I actually only got around to reading the Traveler book a few days ago after I pretty much just accidentally found it in a bookstore. Anyway, so what is Traveler? It's the first part of a children's book set in the Warcraft universe. It's a 300-page novel, more or less pretty much the same length as the other adult Warcraft novels, and follows the story of a 12-year-old boy named Aramar Thorn. Now, as usual, I'm going to keep this first part of the video as spoiler-free as possible, and I will talk about the actual story of the book in depth afterwards, for those who want to avoid spoilers and such. I'll add a little sign on the screen so you can see where spoilers start. So, what did I think of the book? I quite enjoyed it, despite it being labeled as a children's book. Although, I don't know, maybe I just don't read that many children's books, but this one had an awful lot of violence, gore, and death in it. There's no sex or romance or such in the book, at least in the first part. But like I said, there's plenty of violence, so parents should keep this in mind if they want to buy it for their children. The story is almost always told from the perspective of the main character, Aramar Thorn, with a few exceptions here and there, so we pretty much only have, for the most part, his version of events in the story. And I mention this because there are a lot of unexplained things in the book which will probably be explained in the next part as Aramar learns of them. In regards to the story itself, I quite liked it. It's not as sophisticated as, say, War Crimes or Vol'jin Shadows of the Horde, but I still find it engaging enough, despite the fact that it is labeled as a children's book. One common criticism regarding kids' books is that the story is often predictable, but I have to say I don't think this really applies to Traveler. For the most part, there weren't really points where I thought, okay, it's the classical good beats evil in this way or other, or oh, and now the villain will realize the evil of his ways, or stuff like that. No, there wasn't any. I found the book to be pretty engaging, amusing at times, and overall a well-told story. I quite like the plot, since it touches heavily on a type of story quite close to my heart, that of family, and also provided me an opportunity to speculate using my knowledge of the lore on what certain things in the book could be. In a way, the book succeeds in entertaining someone who knows the lore, like me, and probably someone less versed in it. I will say though that the book does commit the sin of sort of falling into a limbo in regards to its rating. The plot is fairly simple, like in a children's book, but at times it can get fairly complex. It is at times filled with violence, gore, and death, but doesn't really take the time to seriously analyze said violence and death. Well, I take that back. Some deaths are seriously fought over and make up a decent part of the book, but sometimes a character will kill, say, random ogre number 40 and not have any reaction despite the fact that the main character is a kid, or well, a preteen. I guess the main element which classifies it as a children's book is that it is filled with illustrations and drawings. The main character, Aramar Thorn, has a habit of drawing some of the stuff he encounters on his journey into his notebook, and said drawings are usually shown within the physical novel itself, sometimes even as a little story point or for pathos. That's not a bad thing, really. There are tons of moments in the lore I wish I had an illustration for. I wish this kind of thing happened more often. In regards to the characters, well, there's a lot of them actually, so not all of them are developed or turn out to be more than one-dimensional, unfortunately. The main characters, however, receive a lot of development, and we can see many different sides on each of them, so the book does compensate in that way a lot. I suppose what's really notable about the book is that it tells the story from the point of view of a commoner, I guess you could say, not a king or a war chief or a chieftain or other important people. So we do get to see the Warcraft universe from the point of view of a 12-year-old common-born boy, for all its advantages and disadvantages this perspective offers. It's a much more personal look, I guess you could say, than the somewhat detached or analytical perspective of, say, Jaina Proudmoore or Thrall, who might miss out on the small details or, on the contrary, focus on other details. Which brings me to the topic of how does this contribute to the overall lore of Warcraft? The answer to that is, I'm not sure at all. Since this is only half of the story, many things are left unanswered, and some things could, for instance, change the entire way we approach worship of the Holy Light, or it could be entirely nothing. On its own, this first part does offer a few minor insights into various races, mostly related to trivia such as the types of greetings Centaur, Tauren, and Quilboar prefer. It does also, perhaps more on accident, answer a few minor lore debates which some in the community have been arguing for a while. I'll talk about the lore stuff which has been revealed in the book, minor though it could be, in the beginning of the spoiler sections before I get into the plot itself. That's because some of the stuff I'm going to mention could be constructed as a spoiler for the actual book, and I'd like to give you, the viewer, the option of avoiding those within this video if you so desire. All in all, as a sort of final verdict before I move on to spoilers, I'd say this book is solid and I'd recommend it to most fans of Warcraft's lore. It's not as engaging, it's not as an extraordinary book, but it's engaging and entertaining enough that, in my opinion at least, you won't regret the purchase. So, moving on to the spoiler section. First of all, I'm going to list some of the lore revelations which happened in this part of the book. Again, I'm not going to talk about some other more speculative stuff yet because I'm really not sure how relevant or true it could be. So, this book has the first appearance, with the exception of the RPG books and physical descriptions of female gnolls and ogres. So I'll score 1 for illustrations being a good thing, I suppose. Gnolls and Murlocs consider drawings or illustrations to be magical in a way and tied to the person they represent. So for instance, a good drawing would represent good magic for the person being drawn, while an unfinished drawing or bad drawing would be bad magic. We get some insight into how certain races of Azeroth prefer to greet each other. Tauren touch their hearts and snouts with their fingers, Centaur bump their fists against their hearts, and Quilboars snort at each other. Monotheistic belief, that is, believing and worshipping in only one single god, is fairly rare in Azeroth, and especially rare among the dwarves. I mention this because there is one secondary character who is a dwarf, who worships Ionar the Lifebinder. Hearthstone is an actual game in the lore which people play. We also get a bit of an inkling into how much money an average person would own in Azeroth. From a fairly successful trading journey, an average-sized trading ship stands to make about 20 gold, give or take, which I suppose makes someone, even someone like me who only has about 30,000 gold in game, feel like a billionaire in the Warcraft universe. The Pandaren have junk ships, as in the Chinese junks. Although those don't make an actual appearance in the novel, they're more mentioned in passing. Druids can use their magic to start small fires. Ogres share some traditions with the orcs, more specifically the Mak'gora. And maybe the biggest lore debate this book answers: are wyverns actually intelligent beings? Yes, wyverns are actually intelligent beings who can understand the Tauren language and are way more than simple beasts. This was a fairly minor but still existing debate in the lore, since in their first appearance in Warcraft 3, wyverns were depicted as intelligent sentient creatures, while in World of Warcraft they have on occasion been portrayed as dumb animals. But no, wyverns are intelligent and have personalities, which is cool, I suppose. Now, in regards to the story itself. The story follows the 12-year-old Aramar Thorn, a boy from Lakeshire, who was abandoned by his father when he was 6 and lives with his stepfather and his mother, along with 2 step-siblings and a dog. Like I mentioned previously, he has a habit of sketching things into a notebook he received as a gift from his stepfather. One day, however, his actual father returns to Lakeshire and convinces Aramar's parents to allow the boy to come with him on a voyage to sea. I should add that the book starts about 6 months into the 1-year voyage and gradually fills us in on the backstory, sometimes through flashbacks. The first third, I suppose, of the book follows Aramar on his father's ship, the Wave Strider, and his relationship with the crew, especially with second mate Makasa Flintwill, the one charged with looking after him, with the people they meet, and with his father especially. Aramar is fairly hostile towards his father for obvious reasons, and the novel does a great job of showing his love-hate feelings towards his father, I guess you could say, while also showing his father's side of the story very well, despite the fact that the story is told from Aramar's point of view. How he wrestles with regret at what he did, Aramar's father I mean, how he still loves his son, but nonetheless how he has to keep something hidden from him. Now again, I have a soft spot for stories about family, so I quite enjoy this part of the story and was fairly emotionally involved in it. I honestly don't know if other people will enjoy it, but it was my personal favorite part of the book. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the crew of the Wave Strider because, with 3 or 4 exceptions, they are mostly minor characters mentioned only once or twice, and honestly kind of hard to remember. Of those exceptions, those characters are well written, albeit they are always seen from Aramar's perspective, of course, and they manage to be entertaining or at the very least interesting. Now, throughout the story, at least for the part he appears in, Aramar's father keeps staring at the compass he has, which he later entrusts to his son. We later learn that the needle of the compass is made of something that is outside of this world and is somehow related to the Holy Light. Both Aramar and his father also have visions of a being of the Holy Light, pleading with them to save it. The bow of the ship also depicts a Naru on it, although the characters don't know that it is a Naru, only that it is something which Aramar's father saw in a vision. So the name Naru is never specifically stated, but if you just look at the bow of the ship you can see that, yeah, it's a freaking Naru. So, near the end of the novel also, Aramar finds another piece just like the needle of the compass. Now, Aramar's father, and later Aramar, is chased by a group called the Hidden, which are kind of a creepy bunch even though all but 3 of them are just mercenaries. The Hidden are led by the human Malice and are after the compass for an as of yet unspecified reason. I quite like the characters of the Hidden, with the possible exception of Malice, who was kind of a typical mustache-twirling villain. Other than Malice, we have the Ogre Frog, who isn't really a dumb ogre, and he is also an ogre traditionalist, taking offense at several points when Malice ignores ogre tradition. There's the sand troll tracker Zafra and her scorpid Skitter, which are alright but not very notable. There is a Forsaken mercenary who is maybe the greatest member of the Hidden, since he just nonchalantly pokes fun of them, has a fairly morbid sense of humor, and also at one point almost sabotages their plans just because he can. And then there's Sarbik, an Arakoa sorcerer, probably the most pompous member of the group and also the one most dedicated to finding the compass, which he intends to use to serve the Hidden's Dark Master. The Hidden also refer to the compass as the pieces of a weapon later on in the novel. So these are pretty much the pieces of the puzzle I talked about. Now the reveal could be something as banal as the pieces being revealed to be an ordinary Naru, with the weapon part being more of a metaphor and the Hidden being just another cult among many, or it could be something bigger. I genuinely don't know. So, as Aramar's father was about to reveal the reason he abandoned his family, presumably related to the compass, the Hidden are revealed to be planning to attack the Wave Strider, making him suddenly become silent. During the attack, the Wave Strider is captured, sunk, and Aramar's father is presumably killed, while Aramar and second mate Makasa escape on a boat. I should mention that Makasa and Aramar are pretty much always in a conflict with each other, but they gradually warm up to one another due to their predicament. Makasa was also upset at the disrespectful way Aramar was treating his father, and was later revealed that she saw him as a sort of adoptive father herself, only to be pretty much shoved aside when Aramar came to the ship. She was rescued from death while she was a child by Aramar's father, and consequently, as she saw it, owed him a life debt, which she then called in during the attack to make her promise to protect Aramar. The two eventually come to see each other as brother and sister, so heart warms all around, etc., etc. Aramar and Makasa manage to shipwreck in Feralus and decide to travel southeast to Gadgetan, since that's the way the compass points. They are also soon followed by the Hidden. Eventually, along the way, they meet a Murloc named Murky, yes really, and a Night Elf Druid named Phallus Greyoak, both of which are fairly endearing characters. Murky, while he does sort of fulfill the role of comic relief, does have his moments as well, and he's especially loyal to Aramar and Makasa. Phallus is also a fairly interesting character, especially since we see him from Aramar's point of view, which does provide a bit of insight into how a Night Elf, or a Night Elf Druid for that matter, would be seen from an outsider's perspective. I also have to say that it was a bit of a relief as a reader to have an actually experienced ally on their side when odds seemed entirely stacked against them. Anyway, the Hidden eventually catch up to them, kidnap Murky, and demand the compass as ransom. Before the trade can take place, however, Aramar's group, with the exception of Makasa, is captured by ogres and taken to Dire Maul to take part in gladiatorial combat as slaves. These events also provide an interesting insight, as seen from Aramar's eyes, of the ogre culture and of Dire Maul itself. The Hidden then, ironically enough, have to rescue Aramar's group from the Dire Maul. While in the dungeons, however, Aramar befriends the other inmates, including a crippled Tauren, a young male Gnoll, and Murky's family. Aramar then defies the ogres during the gladiatorial matches, refusing to fight his opponent, and so the ogres send the captured wyvern to eat them both. Aramar, however, manages to befriend the wyvern by removing its leash, while Phallus rescues her captive children. At the same time, the Hidden nonchalantly slaughter the defenses of Dire Maul, and Malice challenges King Gordok himself to a duel. Malice wins, though he is injured, but Aramar's group uses the confusion to escape. However, just before they manage to flee, Phallus is struck by an arrow from behind and dies later on. So overall, this is the situation at the end of the book. Aramar, Makasa, Murky, and the young Gnoll Hako have two pieces of the compass and are heading to Gadgetan from the border between Feralus and Thousand Needles. Malice has taken over Dire Maul as the new King Gordok and has ordered the entire clan of ogres to pursue Aramar's group. The other inmates, led by the Tauren, have all managed to escape and went their separate ways. So this is pretty much in short the story of World of Warcraft Traveler. There are lots of small things I left out, mostly in the writing of the work, because, in my opinion, it really does deserve a read, at least for the, in my opinion, greatly written character interaction, and pretty great attention to detail. Again, I'm not sure if I'd recommend the book to a child, since pretty much every fighting scene contains some death and gore, even if it is not described in as much detail as, say, the sack of Telmore in Rise of the Horde. All in all, I hope you found this video to be informative, and I will see you all next time. Farewell.